So you have seen all the primitive types in JavaScript. Now let's take a look at the reference types. In the reference types category, we have objects, arrays, and functions. In this lecture, we're going to explore objects, and you will learn about arrays and functions later in this section. So, what is an object? An object in JavaScript and other programming languages is like an object in real life. Think of a person. A person has name, age, address, and so on. These are the properties of a person. We have the same concept in JavaScript. So when we're dealing with multiple related variables, we can put these variables inside of an object. For example, here we have two variables, name and age. They're highly related. They are part of the representation of a person. So instead of declaring two variables, we can declare a person object. And then instead of referencing these two different variables, we can just reference the person object. It makes our code cleaner. So let's see how we can declare a person object. We start with let or const if we don't want to reassign the person object, and set it to an object literal. So this syntax we have here, these curly braces, is what we call an object literal. Now, between these curly braces, we add one or more key value pairs. So the keys are what we call the properties of this object. In this case, we want this person object to have two properties or two keys, name and age. So we add name here, that's the key. Then we add a colon, and after that we set the value, so mosh. Now we add a comma and add another key value pair, age 30. So now we have a person object with two properties or two key value pairs, name and age. And with that, we don't need these two variables. Now let's log person on the console. So console.log person. Save the changes. So here's our person object. Again, note the object literal syntax. So we have curly braces, and in between them we have one or more key value pairs. And these are the properties of the person object. Now, there are two ways to work with these properties. Let's say we want to change the name of this person. So we need to access the name property. There are two ways. The first way is what we call the dot notation. So we add the name of our object, in this case person, dot. Now you can see its properties. We have age and name. So we can change the value of name to John. Now we can use the dot notation to also read the value of a property. So here on line 10, instead of logging the person object, we can log its name property. Now save the changes, and in the console we get John. The other way to access a property is using bracket notation. So bracket notation. So instead of dot, we use square brackets, and we pass a string that determines the name of the target property. So single or double quotes, but single quotes are more common. The name of the target property is name. So we can change that to, let's say, Mary. Again, when reading that, we can use the dot notation or the bracket notation. If we save the changes, now we get Mary on the console. Now you might be asking, which approach is better, dot notation or bracket notation? Well, as you can see, dot notation is a bit more concise. It's shorter, so that should be your default choice. However, bracket notation has its own uses. Sometimes you don't know the name of the target property until the runtime. For example, in our user interface, the user might be selecting the name of the target property. In that case, at the time of writing code, we don't know what property we're going to access. That is going to be selected at runtime by the user. So we might have another variable somewhere else, like selection, that determines the name of the target property that the user is selecting, and that can change at runtime. With this, we can access that property using the bracket notation in a dynamic way. So we pass selection here, and we get the same result. Okay? Now, if this is confusing, don't worry. You're going to see this again in the future as you gain more experience with JavaScript. For now, just stick to the dot notation because that's cleaner and easier. Next, we're going to look at arrays.